Hello, hello. It felt like launching people to space, you know, they like 1, 2, 3, and you go. All right, thank you very much for joining. We have a panel on next generation robotics with Andy and Jacob. And we have about 30 minutes to discuss lots of different things. I think they don't start the timer yet, which is good, so we have extra time. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is essentially two things. So I would like to have your opinion on the state of the robotics today. So what do you think is going on, what do you find interesting? And second, talk about how you as VC work with this domain. What is your area of interest, what you're looking for, and maybe share with us some of the secrets that you are working with. But before we go there, as a quick introduction, could you please share your background and also your personal connection to robotics? What have you done in this domain? Andy, you start.
Thanks, Vladimir. Andy, partner at node.vc, early stage tech VC based out of Stockholm, but investing across the Nordics. Have a lifelong passion and interest for robots, not only the haircut from the 80s, but also all of the science fiction and all of the engineering craziness from the 1980s got me on fire about this space. I've done a couple of angel investments in robotics in two really cool companies, and I've also worked as a head of engineering at a robotics company called Robotics, while also being an investor. So that's a little intro of myself.
Okay. Yeah. Jacob, for you.
Thanks. Yes, I'm Jacob. I'm actually based here out of Helsinki, but investing all across Europe and also the US. And roughly 5 years ago, started building up what we call our industrial tech team with NGP Capital, which is the fund I work with, and really a core sub-segment of what we define as industrial tech is robotics, which we've covered for roughly 5 years as well, but only, let's say, last year really started to make investments into the space. So we now have 3 robotics companies in the portfolio and are actively looking to bolster that going forward as well.
And which companies are in your portfolio right now?
So we have Anybotics out of Switzerland. It's a quadruped mobile robot. Some of you maybe know the Boston Dynamics Spot, the dog-like looking dog robot. So it's a similar form factor as that, used for inspecting complex industrial assets like power plants, oil and gas facilities, and so forth. Then we have one company we haven't announced yet, but it's a company that is leveraging existing industrial robot arms, integrating their own computer vision stack to those robots, and then providing a material finishing application with that system. And then the third one is SVT Robotics, which is focused on the warehousing segment. And within warehousing, they're specifically focused on the interoperability challenge. So how do you get different robotic systems to, for instance, communicate with each other? And how do you get those systems to communicate then with the enterprise level system, like the WMS or the warehouse management system, for instance, so that there's a continuous flow of data and information between these systems.
Jakob, can you get me a discount code for the Anybotics robot?
Sure.
Please.
Okay, excellent. So, taking it as a start, what is your view on the state of robotics today? Are you excited with what's happening? Or you're like, okay, we'll see, the better times are still to come? Is there anything that interests you in what's happening?
I mean, of course, super excited. Also confused.
Okay.
I think there's so many changes happening. In the one sense, there are a lot of more single task-oriented robots in the market and a high acceptance for those, and they actually work. So that creates interesting investment opportunities. On the other hand, there's a big shift in the technologies happening, which means that investing in one type of architecture or product right now might be superseded really quickly. So I think that creates a confusing situation, but also exciting at the same time.
Okay. Do you see interesting architectures emerging, or it's still about like trying different ways, different approaches?
I think, yeah, of course. I think the architectural shift is the is the big thing right now, moving from being rather closed systems to being more open systems. The whole thing about re-architecting this perception, actuation, planning loop, using generative AI techniques instead of the more classical techniques. That's a huge thing that's happening. At the same time, it's not really ready for prime time, but it creates lots of opportunities. Then, of course, we have the whole humanoid robot movement, which either is an opportunity or a threat to totally reinvent everything. So yeah, super excited about the space.
And where do you see more potential today? In hardware or in software when it comes to robotics?
For us, it's quite clear. It's end-to-end systems, so hardware plus software. At least until to date, we've really tried to find, let's say, pure software companies to invest in when it comes to robotics. But so far, we haven't really seen any of those scale. And from our perspective, there's a couple of reasons for it. One is that customers are just not ready to deal with the level of complexity that they themselves would need to stitch together software and hardware and make the system work in a way. Of course, system integrators can do that for them, but still it adds one layer of complexity from a customer perspective. So the more scalable way to grow from a company perspective has, the way we've seen it, been to offer an end-to-end system. And then also in terms of just the tech stack, it just hasn't been mature enough yet in order to really drive a pure software strategy. Now it's of course super interesting to see what is happening with vision language action models and these kinds of topics, in case that is now, let's say, the next shift that really also enables more pure play software companies to really create a good wedge in the market for themselves.
Okay. And do you see what's happening with Gen AI, with LLMs, as the breakthrough, or you're skeptical about it?
So I think there's maybe two other things that have already happened that have been big breakthroughs. One is simulation, so what you can do in terms of simulation capabilities, just driving down the cycle in terms of iterating on product and getting the product reliability and performance there, instead of having to have real-world data and real-world experience for the robot. Instead, it can just run millions and millions of simulations before you do that, so it's just faster and cheaper to develop these kinds of solutions. So that's one thing, and then there's the element of reinforcement learning, which you can, it's not LLM in that sense, but it's certainly deep learning that some of the cutting-edge mobile robotics companies at least are using to date, so that the robots can, let's say, adapt to the environment, adapt to changes in their environments, and in a sense learn on the fly as well. And then now, from my perspective, the cherry on top of the cake is maybe the potential that the natural language interfaces and the vision language action models then provide next, and certainly seeing a lot of action and action happening on that front as well.
I think that was a really good question. I think the whole Gen AI stack coming into robotics, it's really exciting because there's a magic to it, and there's a possibility to move away from more explicit programming and planning to other types of techniques in the stack. So that feels really, really promising, and there's a lot of great research and some really great papers coming out, that whole effort. At the same time, it feels like for more mission-critical applications, safety-critical applications, it's not quite there yet due to the obvious reasons and deficits of the Gen AI techniques. So that's going to, I think, still prolong the runway for the classical techniques and these more safety-critical tasks. But we've already seen some of the self-driving software stacks and so on switching away from classical to more machine learning techniques. So I guess that will continue, but maybe slower. I wouldn't like to make a prediction. Maybe slower than we expect when it comes to sharp deployments.
But there are two issues in relation to that, which I'm curious to find your opinion about. So the first one is about when especially comes to simulations, about training data. So we desperately lack proper ways to train robots quickly and reliably, especially in all kinds of complex, unfamiliar environments, of which the most important one probably be the household, if we look in that direction where robots can actually go. And like there are a lot of interesting, clever hacks, I would say. So the guys from MIT who are like using people with these sticks, and iPhones attached to collect as much data as possible to simulate over there. Do you see any way to speed that up? Or it will always be depending on a very limited amount of training data?
I think there is a lot of research ongoing about training, and Jakob was speaking about simulation. I think that's a key area. Was reading a paper where they're using video generation, so a lot of training can be done using videos, but training robots via human performance by videos that are available, but also generative techniques can create their own videos and then feed them back into the training set for robots. So I saw a really interesting paper where using generative AI to generate the series of steps for fetching a piece of fruit from the top of a table, and then using that human performance basically to train a robot in a feedback loop. So I think there's going to be a lot of techniques for training robot architectures using human performance, and the human performance is basically generated by AI. So it's a synthesized human performance, which I think is it's mega cool. So yeah, I think lots of opportunities to speed up.
Yeah, fully agreed in terms of the potential of the, let's say, more vision language action models, but let's say maybe the big hurdle from my perspective is maybe more on the spatial capabilities or understanding spatial dimension side of things. So far at least I haven't come across any company that's building a, let's say, large language model that is able to understand spatial dimensions, so three-dimensional understanding, because that is, from my perspective, something that could actually unlock some of these, let's say, unfamiliar use cases for the robots. So even if it is put in an environment it hasn't seen before, it is able to understand the spatial dimensions and as such, really get around that issue. So that is to me one of the big bottlenecks that a lot of people, of course, who are way smarter than me are working on. But if that's cracked, then that could be also a next leapfrogging event.
But there is a running joke these days that with the Gen AI and LLMs, the majority of the robots which are now being developed are essentially chatbots, where they have the human language translated into robotese, and they're trying to do something over there. But there's the second thing, which I find a bit concerning, and that was the recent interview from Jan LeCun, where he was talking about the advice that he would give to the PhDs who are now working on AI. And what he said, I don't know if you've seen that one, but he said that LLMs and Gen AI, these are like offshoots, off-ramps on the highway, which should lead to AGI in the end. And his advice was not to focus and not to do work on LLMs. What is your view on this? So it's still useful to continue using LLMs for robotics? Or it's more like, playful time in between before we actually get the next proper breakthrough to make robots smoothly transition from different application domains?
I think my perception a little bit about what Jan was talking about was more if you're trying to do original scientific research in AI, then maybe the LLM area is already pretty well covered, and that maybe you should try out some new things. And I think he's probably also is one of the fathers and grandfathers of the discipline. He's maybe trying to also promote people to work on new tracks. I think from an applied...
Stabbed Elon Musk again, in the back.
Yeah, but I think maybe from an applied perspective, if you're working more as an engineer than as a scientist or a researcher, I think the generative AI techniques, at least based on the papers that have come out and some of the studies and experiments, they seem to be promising, especially for the parts of the robot stack, of course for perception, but also particularly for planning and actuation. And planning, I think, has been a tricky part always, to get away from the kind of the explicit programming to something else. So yeah, that was my perception of that. That's how I took his message.
Okay, Jacob?
Yeah, no, I guess it depends a bit on what kind of environment you're targeting as well. I think you were, Andy, alluding to this as well. Like if you're targeting an industrial environment, sure, you can have a a fancy LLM running in the background or whatever, but if you're not providing industrial grade reliability, no one's going to use it. So you still need to focus on many other aspects of the technology as well. So that is definitely one aspect to consider.
Okay.
And I think I'd like to come back a little bit also on this vertical horizontal thing that you were mentioning, because I think as investors right now, it's either investing in components or investing in vertically integrated full systems. But I think we're all dreaming of a more disaggregated industry where we have more hardware platforms and we have more commonality in the software architecture, so that building higher level software components for robotics could be more common, more universally applied, more investable, because right now you basically have to always invest in some system, full stack system. So that's also something that we're looking a lot for, and we see some companies in that space. Simulation companies are one class of companies, but there are also some companies that are a little bit bold and trying to build a kind of brain, maybe in a vertical domain, but still independent of the hardware.
Okay.
Which I think is fun.
Okay, and so if we look today and a little bit in the past, so we had construction and manufacturing, which has benefited immensely from robotics, which is mostly about pre-programming, standard operations. It's been working very, very well. Now with the advance of robotics today, we see a lot of impact on warehousing. I think especially if we do get the robots which can be trained by telling them in human language what needs to be done, or maybe showing them an example, like handle this object this way and continue like that, they'll have a lot of impact on warehousing. I think we're almost there. It's pretty about finishing. In your point of view, what would be the next frontier of application? What is the next industry which will benefit a lot from where right now, or maybe get disrupted completely? How do you see that?
I have one. You probably have another.
You go first.
You go first.
Yeah. So I'm obviously biased here, but I mean we have a portfolio company that's called Anybotics that's addressing process industries. So these very large, complex chemical plants, oil and gas plants, energy plants, and so forth, where you usually have a lot of stairs. You can have plumbing. So it's messy environments to some extent, and let's say a normal robot on wheels can do the job because you need to walk stairs. The surfaces are not even. You have people moving around. You maybe have different fluids and a lot of dust or chemicals in the air. So it really needs to be a quite versatile platform. And then the robot should actually also be able to do quite many different things. So way more unstructured compared to your typical autonomous mobile robot that would be running in a warehouse, for instance. So that is an example of the things that we are looking for, is really companies that are going after industries that haven't maybe seen robotics adoption yet and are really creating new categories based on new levels of versatility that's being enabled both on the hardware side but also by the advancements on the software side.
Okay, Andy, what is your take?
My kind of like favorite is ag tech, agricultural tech, and horticultural. I think like from a shift perspective, robots are starting to like escape from their cages and their confinement, and collaborative robotics is one example. Yeah, and they're also going from working in very structured environments to unstructured environments. And I think the agriculture and horticultural space are semi-structured. So you have a lot of freedoms, you're still somewhat away from people, you have somewhat lower safety concerns, and you have some structure in the working tasks. So I'm very interested in like unmanned vehicles, autonomous tractors, sprayers, software for those. I think there's a lot of scope. It's a huge industry. There's some already quite high autonomy in the classic vehicles that are available in those industries. So that's one of the areas that I'm very interested in right now when it comes to robotics. And there are quite some companies also active in the space. And I grew up on a farm, so that's a bonus. Yeah.
But the part about flexibility and working in different changing unstructured environments, I see being extremely critical for SMEs in particular, especially smaller manufacturing companies, which cannot afford different types of robots. And their ultimate dream is we can buy one, we can quickly repurpose it without complicated training or programming, especially if they manufacture like small custom batches, which a lot of them do. For them, be like the ideal breakthrough, buy machine once and keep it doing different things. All right, let's talk about the VC side a little bit. But before we go there, I want to ask you one thing to understand a bit more who you are. If you look from your personal perspective, if you look at science fiction, what was the robot that always captivated you personally, and why?
So this is maybe a bit boring, but it's C3PO from Star Wars. Is kind of showed us what the future looks like already quite many decades ago. But yeah, a bit of a clunky one maybe. But
okay, clear. And for you?
Yeah, I like C3PO also, and I think I like the combination, the friendship between R2D2 and C3PO. This kind of Laurel and Hardy relationship of different personalities, the social robotics part. When I was a kid, I used to really like these. There were two robots on this show, Buck Rogers' show. One of them was like a humanoid robot, and the other one was a kind of super intelligence that was sitting in a box. And the humanoid robot was supposed to be cute. It was called Twicky, and it carried the super intelligence around because it couldn't walk. So that was also kind of companionship story. But in recent times, I think like Baymax from the Disney movie is like my favorite, and it's a kind of a very caring, very emotional robot that's basically for healthcare.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're my favorites, nice robots. I also have some favorite evil robots, but maybe we take that
for the next
that's another panel.
Okay, clear. I think we're actually heading there. These are quite clear examples what can be done. But when it comes to your investment thesis, so is there anything specific you're looking at in terms of robotics today? Anything you're hunting for in particular?
I'm personally, I'm definitely looking for viable robotic plays in AgTech, because that's something I think can work, which has a very large market and where the products are viable. And I'm also looking a lot for software plays, even though standalone software plays are not fully viable for robotics yet because the architecture is not harmonized enough. So that could be stuff like planning architecture, planning software systems. It could also be some parts of the perception stack, some parts of simulation. So some parts software, other parts fully integrated systems in AgTech. They are kind of areas where I'm very interested. And then previously I did a lot with social robotics, so I'm still very interested in especially humanoid robots, but the social capabilities of humanoid robots.
C3PO.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if humanoid robots become a thing and the collaborative robotics trend continues, then we're going to need to stand side by side with other robots. And then I think the social interactions between humans and robots working on things become very, very important. And the alignment, you have the whole alignment problem. So I'm very interested in any companies working with a focus on allowing humans and robots to collaborate on tasks. So yeah,
which
long
is
answer.
A very valid point, especially in relation to social robotics, because I remember Farhad was doing a lot of work about genuine facial expressions to communicate to people. And I think it's an interesting point about how communication between robots will actually affect adoption by humans. There was another research project by MIT where they've showed that if a robot is confused and it goes back to human to ask more questions about how to complete the task, that actually builds up the trust in the conversation with human and robot. So I think it's interesting whether the robots be expected to communicate like that between each other, or they'll be allowed to go on some kind of a shortcut. Jacob, and for you, so what are you looking for?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, as VCs, we always try to think about, okay, how big can this company be? And not all robotics companies are the same in that regard. And for us, we're going to continue to spend most of our time on vertically integrated end-to-end systems. But within that, we really look for software as being in the driver's seat when it comes to customer value creation and how this particular company is able to not end up being, let's say, just a robotics provider from a hardware perspective, but really being able to also dominate that category more broadly long term. So whether that is through building out an ecosystem around themselves, integrating other sorts of analytics onto their platform, or potentially even building a multi-robot fleet is kind of different ways to do it. But we definitely want to see a vision of how this company survives longer term, because if you're just focused on the hardware capabilities, you're mostly looking at, let's say, a race to the bottom eventually, unless you're really building a huge system like an auto store. But that space is already taken. And if you look at the industrial robot arms, there's 5 players in the world who own that space. Everyone else lost out, right? So so we're really looking for software being in the value driver's seat, and we're not big fans either of going into segments where you already have 20 different companies that are trying to solve the same thing, but more trying to find companies that are really quite have identified a really meaningful customer problem early on, but they are maybe 1 out of maximum 5 companies globally who are working on solving that challenge and really leading the pack from a technology perspective. So that's kind of how we think about it. We're trying to have a very open mind as to what the application could be. It's more, the customer should guide us in terms of what's the most exciting and interesting opportunity out there. So that's.
And what is the lowest, the minimum amount of customer validation you would expect when it comes to working in a new domain with robotics?
So I mean, this is from our perspective as a Series A to Series C investor, and for robotics specifically, where we get way more comfortable is when you have a commercially ready product out there. Mm-hmm. So you have proven that this is actually something that is reliable, it solves a customer problem, and you can manufacture it and you can manufacture it in a sensible way, so that there is a clear path to industrialization as well. So that, because with robotics and deep tech, in many cases, usually you go after a super hard problem because you know that there is massive demand out there, and then if you 5 years down the road discover that, but I actually can't scale this from a demand side perspective, that the economics doesn't work out, it's kind of too late. So that's another thing that we really want to see, that the path also to scale, not just the customer side, but also the supply side as the robotics supplier is really intact. So those are some of the things that we usually want to see before we invest.
Andy, and I want to ask you a bit of a reverse question, because we talked about Jan Likon and what he was thinking about research. Are there any technological red flags which would immediately disqualify the company for you? You think that's not worth bothering with?
That's a tricky question. I think currently no, because there is a shift happening. Mm-hmm. I think if you have an architecture that's based on a mature classic stack that's viable, that works for us. By the same token, somebody who's much earlier in their development and they're basically making a bet on the new technologies, that's also viable for us. I think we have to be able to play both of those hands in the game currently, because the shift is happening. And I think the products maybe that have high scale, high volume applications currently, but maybe a low price, they will probably stick to the classic architecture for some time. And maybe new entrants will build on the new architecture, but probably for more complex tasks. So no, I would say no technical blockers.
Okay.
I think it's all about the team.
Okay, clear.
Yeah.
I want to ask one quick question, because you're integral to the operations of your firms. And do you have a personal ambition when it comes to robotics? Is there anything like you really want to have accomplished with the help of the investments in a bit of the future?
Personally, I definitely want our firm to make a number of robotics investments in the current fund.
Okay.
So that's a personal ambition for me. That's not always shared by the whole firm,
Okay.
But then it's up to me to prove that I found one or two really good teams that are worthy of an investment and that other people believe in. So that's my personal objective.
Okay.
And I'm very much excited about seeing more robots in the world. I'm also very passionate about seeing robots that can interact and work well with humans. This is like a technical passion I have, and something I think we're going to see in the next 10 to 20 years.
Jacob, for you, very, very quickly?
So, I mean, my personal objective is quite simple in a way, that to find and invest in the next robotics company in Europe that gets to a scale that it can go public in a way and be part of what we think is a next industrial revolution that is going on, so that Europe still is a relevant place to be in, also from an industrial perspective and technological perspective when it comes to complex topics like robotics.
So if you're a startup fundraising, you know who to talk to. I want to take another 30 seconds of your time and quickly ask you a set of 3 questions. Just one word answer each, just to conclude this session. Let's start with you, Jacob. So, don't cheat. So robots will be able to do neurosurgeries by year 20?
Robots will be able to do surgery.
Neurosurgeries, brain surgeries.
2060.
2026.
2060.
Okay.
60.
2060.
Yes.
Okay. Andy, robots will be able to fold laundry by 20?
To fold laundry in an unstructured environment like the home,
Yeah.
I still think it's okay. Some of the current humanoid robots can do demos like this, but
It's one word answer.
one word answer: 2030.
2030.
Still farther away.
Okay. Okay. Jacob, NATO will have robots in infantry by which year?
2024.
Okay. Good forecast. Andy, how much will a robot cost to be in every European household? What's the price point that everybody will accept to do the chores?
My guess would be it has to be well below 10,000 euros, probably below 5,000 euros.
Okay.
Yeah, and then from there on downwards.
Okay. And the final one, Jacob, for you. The first human-to-robot marriage will be approved by which country?
Is this political correct question? Japan?
Japan. Very interesting answer. Okay, Andy, the final one for you. In your point of view, despite of all the progress, robots will never be able to do what?
I don't feel I can exclude anything from that list if you look on a very long horizon. I think the things that we treasure as humans, empathy, love, caring, that's some way off until that is a genuine existence in robots, but not impossible.
Thank you for that answer. I think despite of all the progress, there is hope for us in the future. On this note, I suggest we close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Super, super insightful.